So it's just some PDFs like
We're on our third building.
Welcome to Hope, and this is
Stuff
what
like
Hope is. Because a lot of people probably don't even know for just driving up that Hope is there, what it has, why it's a benefit.
So there's this.
Do I have to get it
I think so.
Yeah, like what the community has to offer. Like I think there's so many parents that come in from like out east from North Carolina, like Florence.
It was there, and it was all good.
It's not only like a safe
Like
place,
changing
it's also a lot
I
of
think we've been exactly the
You're gonna get them to stay because we need to retain every single one of those households. I mean, all of them. All of them.
We've gotten it down.
The thing is, where's the not going to go? Especially if they're taking out now.
Hopefully, I'm thinking.
Right.
I don't know. Sometimes those little things make a difference.
Right now, I have like a big lot of people because I wish it's gas money.
It's not.
So that's weird.
I would guess the market occurs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it.
This is not that
Hopefully, we'll.
Here's what it is.
I mean, that's your screen, right?
Yeah.
Has the, do you know if the DDA will let this go? Because I know at one point there was a lot of blowback about more student housing. Okay.
I wonder if it's displaying to a certain.
Okay, that'd be good.
See, look at that now.
Yeah, that's so weird.
So hopefully we get this.
It's like plain screen bingo or something. I wonder if it's, I mean, when you're not displaying on another screen, I wonder if it's a display setting now. Right, you have to set it and like the display.
We've never built up there. We built 3 projects.
I wonder if it's like thinking you're on two, it's rather than mirroring it, it's sending one to another.
Yeah, like the Bow Rector Center.
Any news up here?
Yeah, that would be cool. And also, I think the alumni welcome sometimes have some alumni come in. You know, maybe alumni come in and it's free Wi-Fi. It's like, yeah, because the bookstore is impossible to find.
I think she only had one.
Is it something up on?
Are you having trouble there?
Yeah, and it's pretty, I mean, like, even the one at the Big B is so cool. Like, I know my stuff, but the stuff is nice there. Otherwise, I wouldn't get into it. At the Big B in Hayworth Inn, there's that Hope merchandise there. Oh, yeah, it's like really cool. A lot of good Hope stuff. I'm like, I want that t-shirt. Like, it's all comfy, really nice stuff. It makes me, like, want to buy Hope things. Or you Calvin.
Hello, everyone. Sorry we got started late. We had some technical difficulties. I am calling the Planning Commission meeting to order for today, June 14, 2022. Approval of the minutes is needed for the May 10, 2022 regular meeting.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Communications from the audience for items that are not listed as a public hearing on the agenda can come forward at this time. All right, new business. The first item under new business is adoption of the 2022 non-motorized transportation plan.
Thank you. So we have Lynnae Wells here tonight from Aligned Planning. She was part of the consultant team that we hired to do this work. And we have completed it on time, on budget. So pretty happy about that. They did a really good job. We had some really good public input. Before Lynnae goes through it, I guess I just wanted to point out a couple things. One, interestingly enough, I just came from a meeting at our transportation office with some MDOT officials, and they asked us, among other things, well, is that in your non-motorized plan? And we were talking about M40 down by the interchange, and once it's in our plan, we might be able to take advantage of some opportunities with there. So that's just one example, of course, of many. So we're hoping to take advantage of everything in the plan. The other item that I thought was really nice, one of the results of this, was at the end of the plan, there's essentially an evaluation tool to help us look at future projects. Obviously, we're not going to be able to list out everything that anybody could ever think of in this version of the plan. And so that's a tool that we'll be able to use moving forward to help go forward. So this is just a plan. You're not approving any of these projects. This is a tool that staff will use and bring to whether it's the Planning Commission or the City Council for future projects. So that being said, we are asking the Planning Commission, and this will also be going to City Council, to approve the plan. Just a simple voice vote would be great. Since that's the way that the current plan was adopted, we thought we would just repeat that process and ask for your approval as well as City Council's. So with that, I guess I'll kick it off to Lynnae.
All right, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynnae Wells. I'm an urban planner. I own my own firm, Aligned Planning. I'm located over in Grand Rapids, 1451 Robinson Road. But I've been working in West Michigan for the last 17 years and grew up going to our family cottage in Grand Haven for my whole life. So I certainly know Holland quite well and this whole region. So I'm happy to be here tonight. Why don't we get into this presentation? So Steve, do you mind advancing the slide? I just want to give an overview of what the non-motorized plan is and sort of what it is not. It's not an engineering plan. It's not a designed, engineered set of plans for intersections or streets. It's not at that detailed level. It's also not a capital improvement plan, but it is a guide for you as a planning commission, for the city and city staff, to set priorities for non-motorized facilities. So we hope that this would be used by City Commission, the engineering department, when they work on their capital improvements plan. It can be used by the Planning Commission when you weigh in on that capital improvements plan. It can also be used by you during site plan review. For example, it might be important to pull out this plan and some of the recommendations for pedestrian or bike facilities as new development comes online. Perhaps there's ways in your zoning ordinance you want to include things like bike racks or bike repair stations, or have folks think about crosswalks and any sort of streetscape improvements and how those interface with non-motorized facilities. So that's how we would envision the Planning Commission using this document. We developed this document using both quantitative and qualitative analysis, and I'll get into some of that detail here in a minute.
But a few of the things that we looked at was census data. We looked at the existing conditions in the city. We looked at city planning documents, so your master plan. We looked at other plans in the region. The MDOT non-motorized transportation plan was something we looked at, and we interfaced with the Metropolitan Planning Organization to make sure that everything that we have in this document corresponds and relates and connects to those other regional facilities, because we are working to build a network. We also developed this in coordination with public stakeholders. We had a stakeholder committee, as well as we did a public open house, and we had digital engagement that I'll get into in a minute. So the next slide. As I mentioned, we looked at those existing conditions, so we wanted to identify where current facilities are, where there's gaps in the network. Some of the interesting things that we recognized was that pretty much your existing original kind of core city, where we have the grid system, is really well served by sidewalks and several bike facilities. It's the areas of the community where you're growing, where we're seeing more high density development and also more business and industry, where we have a lot of gaps in the system. This map, and this is in your plan as well, I always found it interesting when I looked at kind of the southeast quadrant of the community and how we have those little circles are bus stops. And I pointed this out at the open house. So we have all these bus stops and bus routes, but no sidewalks. And we always have to think about the bus rider and how they're a pedestrian on either side of their trip. So those sidewalk connections are going to be really important in those areas, especially as we're trying to offer opportunities for making decisions about how you move about the community other than in your own personal vehicle. So it's going to be really hard to move the needle to say, hey, how about taking the bus or how about the bike, when we don't have kind of the minimum level of accommodation for someone in using that trip mode. The next slide shows vehicle crash data. And this is with pedestrians, and this data is only through 2020. The unfortunate thing is that 2021, the crash data nationally and what we're seeing in small communities as well, is that the crash rates have increased at a rate higher than we've seen in previous years. And you might think, well, fewer people are on the road. That might be the case, but because there's fewer vehicles, people had tended to drive faster, and they're not quite sure why the crash data has increased so much during COVID and post-pandemic, but they think it's also related to just kind of mental health and people's just emotional level as they're driving and on the roads. And maybe we have more people choosing to walk for economic reasons as well. We don't know all the reasons. We can speculate, but it's unfortunate that we're seeing more and more instances of serious and fatal injuries with pedestrians and the car. The next slide is the bike facility network. So again, this is showing us where there's gaps. Similarly, we have gaps in that area of the community where we're seeing more growth with multifamily housing, with industry, very similar to the sidewalk system. And the next slide shows that vehicle crash data with bikes. Again, the data is very similar with pedestrians. We are seeing increased rates of instances of crashes. And we're always going to have a higher concentration where we have higher pedestrian or higher density, right, of people living. We have the school. We have a lot of things that are attracting people to walk and bike, and so we are going to see more of that instances of crash. But the fatal numbers, I think some of those darker red are on the outskirts of the city, again, where we have kind of higher speeds, and we really need to work on the safety measures there. Our next slide shows the households without vehicles. And again, looking at the pattern, I'm sorry, I flipped one. So this slide is the median age. So as we look at folks who are advanced ages. This is where we would find people who maybe have challenges even keeping a driver's license or qualifying for a driver's license because of advanced age or mobility issues where they may not be able to drive. So we might look at this and think, okay, those areas would be a priority. And the next slide shows the economic and households without a vehicle. And again, overlaying that with the crash data, with where we have the gaps in the network. Again, a lot of our focus, I would say, as Planning Commission might be those parts of the city where we have higher concentrations of people who maybe don't have a choice whether they can drive to their destination. When we started out this planning process, we also wanted to come to the table with some common terms because we often get caught, with jargon, and we want to make sure that everyone was on the same page. So we created this list of common terms that we used with our public engagement process, with our stakeholder group, and also it's in the document. So that as you're talking about non-motorized, we have a definition. As we talk about facility or bike lane, people know exactly what we're meaning when we use that language. So that's in the plan. As well as the next slide, which is related to the different types of improvements that we could use. So we have two sets. So there's pedestrian level improvements and then vehicular level. And we wanted to provide a visual example of what those improvements would be and then the costs associated with them. So as we move into kind of setting the priorities, we're stating this is the menu of solutions that you could use and connecting that with the location on the map. All right, the next slide related to the engagement summary. So as I mentioned earlier, we had both the quantitative and also the qualitative set of data that we were using to pull this plan together. And because we were in COVID times when we started, we really relied heavily on the digital engagement tool, which is also nice because people can't always make it to meetings, and it gave folks an opportunity to really kind of dig in, I would say, and they weren't forced to make some decisions at a 1 hour or 2 hour meeting. They were able to really take the materials, look at what was available to them and take time with the survey. And we also had a mapping tool where you could select one of those facilities, so like a bike lane or a crosswalk, and you could pull it onto an aerial map in the city and help us identify where geographically those improvements would be done. So we had 2,400 total visits to that website, 148 unique stakeholders. And then I can go through some of the survey responses. Not surprisingly, most people drive a car here in Holland, but they choose to drive the car because of travel time. And I found that kind of interesting because that means that people are concerned about getting from A to B quickly, which means they might be going fast, which is also very dangerous for people walking and biking. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there that hopefully as we invest more in sidewalks and safer crosswalks and bike lanes, it will be more common to see people biking and walking and taking the bus. So that becomes more familiar to folks who might be choosing to take the car. And when we have more of those facilities, those trips can be more predictable and quicker. We also asked folks with which methods of non-motorized or active transportation do they participate in, and predominantly it is walking or biking, but for recreation, exercise, or enjoyment. So really they're not choosing to walk or bike to get to the store, to get to work, to get to school. It's really more leisure. And the reason that that was informative for us is then we were able to kind of really look at parks, look at those recreation facilities like the lake shore, and make sure that the lanes, the bike lanes and sidewalks connected to those places. The next slide just shows you that interactive map that I mentioned. So as people were able to put those points on the map and tell us a little bit more about their priorities. And then we did an open house here in this room in the spring. And what we did is we shared recommendations for the bike facilities and the pedestrian facilities. And then we asked people to prioritize. If they could pick one, which would it be? And then we asked for general comments. So in the plan, we listened to the public, we used our best practices, we used the data that was available, the overarching goals, as I mentioned earlier, connecting to parks and trails because that recreation piece was so, ranked so high from the public. And then moving down is connecting to these other things, destinations, downtown, to neighborhoods, and then really working to offer these options to help improve the public health. So in the document, you'll see a bike improvement plan, which is on your screen, and please feel free to take some time with that. But it identifies existing as well as proposed. And we show the bike lanes, we show a multi-use path, which tends to be an off-street bike lane, essentially, and then a share-o, which is a shared space. We also have the pedestrian improvement plan, which is very similar. It shows existing conditions and then proposed. You'll see the icon for the person walking. That's where there's gaps in the sidewalks where we'd prioritize filling in those gaps. And then the red line is where we would add the sidewalks. And then all of the numbered icons on that map indicate specific locations like crosswalks or mid-block crossings where attention needs to be paid to that, and there's a recommendation for that specific location in the action plan. Incidentally, intersections are the location where most of these crashes or fatalities happen. It's the most dangerous place for somebody walking or biking because there's so much movement happening at an intersection. We also break these maps into districts, so you could take a deeper dive and a closer look at the facility. So we show the pedestrian and bicycle improvements at the district level. And then we establish criteria. Steve mentioned that, that he found that these last several pages of the document were very helpful, and that we created a system where we had a set of criteria, including some of that demographic data, like zero-car households, lower-income households, the aged places where we have aging population, that the location is close to a school or a park. We also, the whole criteria is here on the slide, but the other criteria that we felt was really important was what the public told us at that open house. So that's another one of those kind of points that any project could be awarded so that we can then prioritize where to make improvements. So there's low, medium, and high priority. And then the last 5 or 6 pages of the document includes all of the projects. They're numbered. It includes an icon for the criteria that is met, and then the priority level on the column to the right. And those are broken down by bike lane improvements, pedestrian improvements, the non-motorized, or the off-street improvements. And that way, I think that will be very beneficial for capital improvement planning, for the transportation and department and planning and others to kind of work together so that there can be a very predictable way of accomplishing these goals and these projects. So the next steps are to, obviously we're here hopeful that you would approve this plan. This will be presented at the study session with the City Commission on June 22nd. Then it will be on their agenda July 6th. And then implementation is ongoing. So it's not just the projects, but I do think that there's a unique opportunity in your seats to look at how walking and biking and busing can be considered during any site plan project. Maybe there's a big project, like perhaps one that would come to the study group where could you integrate a bus stop into the project? Could you think about doing maybe the university does a custom bus stop that has a shelter and seating. Some of those amenities could be considered or talked about or encouraged even with a PUD project. Maybe that's one of those community benefits as you're weighing your zoning options during some projects that might be more of a negotiation. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Anybody have any questions for Lynnae?
I have comments, but not questions.
Well, only questions right
That's
now.
what I figured.
No, I'm just
I
kidding.
do know Josh.
I have one, the local transit authority, the MAX, were they
Yes.
part of this as well?
They were, yes,
Okay.
yes. Elisa was on our stakeholder committee and definitely participated in
Yes.
our online engagement, and was very present talking about some of the challenges that they're having. And I think that's why I led with some of that focus on the bus riders, right, being the pedestrian on either side of the trip. And often they're just given, a signpost, and that's about it. And so any way that we can help kind of dignify that experience, I think, is going to help with that mode shift.
Comments are allowed now.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Any comments from anybody?
Yeah, great tool, great work. It was not lost on me that this was on time and on budget. One of those things that we do well here, and I always like the public to be aware of that as well, because planning costs money, but not planning tends to cost more money. It gives us, I think this is going to be a great tool, a filter for us when looking at projects, and also, like you said, when you talked about the bus stops, and guess what? There's no sidewalks leading to that bus stop. I thought to myself, well, that's not good planning. That doesn't make any sense at all for us when we start looking at these things, trying to make sure that all of this is integrated. So it's going to be a great tool, and I think a great filter when we're looking at options and opportunities, because we do have limited resources available to us. When I looked at the map, I went, yeah, I'd love to have sidewalks in my neighborhood, but when I'm looking at the priorities, there are higher priorities other places, and we need to address and attack each one of those based on what the priority level is, what the need is, and what the resources are that are available. And this is going to be a great tool for us to be able to help with that.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Thank you. There can sometimes be some pushback with those sidewalks, right? If you're coming in and there's no sidewalks next to you, and you often hear, well, why do I have to build a sidewalk across the frontage? There's not anything north of me or south of me. And, you're going to hear that, but stay strong and know that change is incremental. And if we could do all of it, to your point, Mayor, if we could do all of it at once, we would. But we do have to just take those steps one at a time. And that's how cities were built.
I just really appreciate the report and how easy it is to read. And I think that a lot of the visuals that you added, that represent kind of a biker's normal visuals with the priority and level of importance. I think that that's great, and it's just an easy way for us to, look at the report as we're planning and approving things in the future. So, good job.
Thank you.
Lynn?
Yeah, I was involved from the beginning on those online meetings we had back in the winter, and I remember thinking, this is such a massive amount of information. How is this all going to be organized? This is so impressive how you've taken really important pieces of information and created, as Jennifer said, a really accessible document that makes a whole lot of sense. And I just, appreciate all of the work that you all did looking at existing plans and incorporating them into what this plan. I just think you did a wonderful job, and I really appreciate all the work.
Thank you. I do want to give a shout out to MKSK and Anne Marie as well, our project manager. They did a great job with this layout and taking all of the comments and really collaborating with the city. So I don't stand here alone. They are also here.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? This is right up my alley. I really appreciate all of this. I think that our city can do a lot better in making the biking and multimodal transportation for all residents more accessible to everybody. And I can name a park right now that has no sidewalk in front of it. It's not accessible at all by any pedestrians, and it's right in the city on 32nd Street. So I think that there are definitely some good projects that we can do and use this as a great tool for that. I know there's a lot of cities out there that are playing catch up, and it's a painful process. And if we can get this ahead of time, it'll go a lot better. So thank you.
Thank you.
Looking for a motion to approve?
This doesn't require a public hearing?
It doesn't.
Okay, it's gonna go to council?
We are gonna take it to city council.
Okay, will it have a public hearing then, or does it not, it just doesn't require that?
It doesn't require it.
Okay,
We haven't talked about that.
all right.
So we're looking for a motion to recommend adoption?
So the planning commission adopted the last plan as well as the city council, so maybe if you could make the same, if you want to also recommend to the city council, that would be great, but I guess we were looking for both groups to approve it since you did last time.
Okay. I can't make a
Move-
motion,
move-
so
I would move to affirm and
move it to council.
move to council.
I would
Okay.
support that motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
I'll
very
adjust
much.
that to city council on my slide. I'm sorry. I'm used to commission. So,
It's okay.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item under new business is 1245 East 16th Street, 1255 East 16th Street, and 1269 East 16th Street. Site plan approval request to construct a 196-unit multifamily apartment development. The applicant would like to come forward. And just state your name and position.
My name is J.R. Kendall with Kendall Property Group from Indianapolis, Indiana. I'll try not to bore you since you've all seen the project now, I don't know how many times, but what we're showing you tonight is our 196 units. That's all in the HDR portion of our property. As a reminder, we're the developer and the general contractor. Naderveld Engineering is our civil engineer. Weaver Sherman from Indianapolis is our architect, and Village Green, based out of Detroit, is our property management company. So like I said, it's 196 units, 68 one-bedroom units, 100 two-bedroom units, and 28 three-bedroom units. The buildings are the same style that we have at the first phase Shoreline Flats. The buildings have some very slight modifications, but nothing that, if you're not looking at the plans of the two, you would never notice the difference. So it'll be the same aesthetics. If we could go to the site plan, in getting below the 200 unit threshold, we're only required to have one entrance. So we'll have a single entrance off of 16th Street. You'll enter, and then the property goes up quite a bit to the buildings that are around the pond area. As you can see on the map, all the wooded areas that are left, those are the wetlands areas that we're trying to keep our buildings out of. Those wetlands areas, a lot of them have old growth or some older growth trees in them, so those will be nice for our buildings and for our neighbors to create screening and to create that natural buffer. Let's see. As far as, the plan really hasn't changed except up at the left-hand, the northwest corner, building 12 there. That's where the road used to enter into where the four buildings were on the LDR portion of the ground. So that's become a turnaround, and that radius is built to accommodate the local fire trucks. So otherwise, the LDR ground, we are planned for that. We don't really have a plan yet. We're not going to market the ground. I think that probably I don't want to say likely yet, because construction costs are very difficult thing to judge right now, and we don't know where they'll be here in the next year or two. But one possibility is to do some single-family rental homes on that property that we would do. Before we had the 15-foot berm on that property, that's now gone away. We will do some gradual, I would call it maybe a bank. It only takes the grade up about 5 feet to the middle of that property. And then we'll be removing the rest of the spoils that would have gone into that berm. They'll be taken off site, hopefully somewhere close. And other than that, I mean, we can go, the property will have the full amenity package that we have with the other property, with the pool and fitness center, business center. The clubhouse will be slightly modified because we're gonna be managing out of the first phase, and we'll just have our sales staff in the second phase. And then the units, they have all the modern amenities of apartments these days with granite countertops, 9-foot ceilings, stainless appliances, and full-size washer and dryer and so on. And to keep from reiterating everything I've told you all before, I'll open it up to any questions. So.
Questions or comments from commission members? None. Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Steve, would you like to add anything?
Maybe just one quick comment. It is also part of this project that there would be the center turn lane on 16th Street. So that is still happening with this project. We, the city, are doing a bigger project, so that'll get coordinated with our project, but they're still going to be doing that as part of this project as well.
The bigger project?
They'll have to, be responsible for their portion of the center turn lane, but we will
Gotcha.
certainly coordinate it all, so it's all part of one project.
Right. Great. Anyone else? No? Okay. At this time, we will have a public hearing on this item. If you would like to come forward, you may do so at this time. You have 5 minutes. State your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Jim Schwartz from Holland, and just a couple of comments here.
If you could state your address for the record.
307 Country Club Road. One of it, just for you to bear in mind, Holland Heights has really borne a disproportionate amount of burden for high-density housing. As you come up 16th Street, it's all over the place, and we have low-income housing across from us, and now we'll have more behind us. And almost everybody on the around this property does have problems with their basement. Both of my neighbors have had water in their basement within the last 2 months. The people on the north side have terrible, terrible, terrible problems with their basement. I don't have any problem with water because I spent $6,500 having my basement repaired because it had water in it constantly. So, and then one thing that, I hate to be a spoiled sport, one thing that really bothers me is when we talk about the American dream, we want young people to be able to afford a home. And that was originally low density so people could have a home. And a month ago, I heard that 40% of the people in Holland are renters. When I grew up on 14th Street, I didn't even know anybody who was so poor they had to rent. And it gets harder and harder and harder for people to own a home. And now we build, that property was for people who could own a home, and now they're gonna have to rent. My next door neighbor across the street was telling me a couple weeks ago, she has multiple people in her church. They work the job, then they have to work a second job at Myers to be able to pay the landlord, and then they go to the food bank. Because she works in the food bank, at her church. I'm thinking, what's wrong with it? What's going on? And third thing, I'm not sure that all the new housing, I don't call it housing because it's not housing, this is shelter, because people aren't going to own a home. But I'm not necessarily sure that a lot of this is going to go to Holland people. we got 1,200 more jobs coming in from the battery plant. I would guess that probably 400 of those people are gonna come from maybe Grand Rapids or Muskegon or Burnups or who knows, and we're gonna have to find places for them. And in the Holland tourist book that's put out by the Visitors Bureau, we've got a page in there where we're telling people, come on and relocate to Holland. Well, how big do we want to get? You know, I've lived in Manhattan, I have lived in Philadelphia and Portland, Oregon over the years, and I'm used to having drive-by shootings. I'm used to having all kinds of crazy stuff happen in the daily news. And I know 2 weeks ago, we had a drive-by shooting just a couple blocks from where I grew up. So we gotta figure out how much do we want to grow and how much do we want to retain, you know, what we knew as Holland. When I grew up in Holland, my parents never locked the house. And I never even locked the car door till I moved off to school. So I'd like you to consider how much we want to grow this town, and it's going to change. If we want Grand Rapids, well, then it's okay. And I want us to consider how we're going to take care of the young people. They want to own homes. They don't want to rent for the rest of their life. Anyway, thank you for listening to me, and I love this town, and thank you for the work you're doing. I admire you all.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. If anyone else would like to come forward on this item, you can do so at this time. All right, I will close the public hearing. Discussion, motions among commission members or questions?
Seeing none, I'd move to,
Well, hold on, I don't know. Is anyone over here? I didn't see anything.
I just had a couple of comments, and that is that the project has changed from what it was before, but not significantly in the way that the site plan is laid out. I think that we've had a lot of discussion in regard to the previous iteration of this plan before, that Planning Commission approved. This is a reduced size plan from what was there before, taking out the LDR section, because that zoning change didn't pass at City Council. So we're looking essentially at a smaller plan that we had approved previously.
Mm-hmm.
ready for a motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would move that we approve the site plan with the comments and conditions noted in the staff report.
Support.
All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. None opposed. All right. Thank you very much.
Have at it.
Have at it. All right. Next item on the agenda, proposed text addition to Chapter 39, Section 4.04 of the Unified Development Ordinance regarding campground standards. And I will just say that the next items on the agenda under new business are all about text additions or amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance. And they all require a public hearing. We will go through them one at a time, and then we will can we do a joint public hearing though for all of them?
I guess that's up to you, how you want to do that.
Okay.
I think it's just gonna be important that you kind of make the decision separately.
Sure.
I'll just do a public hearing with each of them.
Still having a little bit of technical difficulty. Give me 1 minute to.
Sure. Do you have your microphone right in front of you there, Steve?
Yep. Is that better?
Yes.
I need a minute to get this loaded up. I don't know what's going on here tonight.
Blame it on the heat.
Yeah.
It's just too hot outside.
Can you get on Wi-Fi there? I did like the pop-up and I forgot.
Yeah.
I couldn't even get the
I've been
pop-up
on.
to happen. I don't know.
Are you on the public?
Yeah, it like, you know how there's that
Like,
pop-up?
as you check the terms.
Yeah, and it doesn't come up, then I disconnected, reconnected.
Okay, I think I made it. So these are the amendments that we had our study session on last month. This is what we're calling Udo Round 4. So as you mentioned, we kind of have these grouped into 4 categories. So I'm just gonna go through all of the amendments, and I'll make sure to mention the ones that we, some more of the just general corrections. Excuse me, if you will. So that's really what you see on the first page here are just some corrections for the TNR. We're essentially taking out the exception for the TNR of how we treat corner lots, treating them like we do with all of our other zoning districts. So
I know you're having technical stuff, but can you make this a slideshow instead? It's a little bit small for me.
I'm having a hard
I know,
time
it's, I should be able to zoom in a little bit, but,
Lynn, can you, is that helpful?
oh, yeah. You know what?
Well, I've read it, so you
Okay.
can, let's just take a look at this.
It's okay. Dave gave me this.
Just go ahead, keep.
You've got it over there?
So you can keep going.
Is it at least showing up on all the TVs though?
Screen, my screen,
Oh,
screen.
oh, that's.
Oh gee, you want, maybe he needs.
So you're going blind?
I can see it, I can see it over here and I have paper copies.
Okay,
Sorry to interrupt.
Is that all right?
that's okay.
Go right.
Sorry. So, yeah, the first couple amendments there, front property lines, secondary street frontage, sort of eliminating that special exception for the TNR district and just treat it like all the other zoning districts for corner lots. And then you just see some re-lettering happening with that. And then at the end of that chapter, just adding some clarification about when do I need a permit, that we think is just some clarification or sort of explanation that we think will help people understand when those things are needed. So not necessarily new information, but just some additional clarification. In the use chart, we have campgrounds. So we already have campgrounds in the zoning district, but they didn't have any standards built into the ordinance. So we wanted to build some standards for campgrounds to give some parameters about what's permitted, what's not. And so that's why you see those categories changing from an S and a P to an S star. So they would all be special use, and the star because now they have some standards that go along with that. That is one of the categories that we're describing as a substantive change because of all of the changes that we have coming with that one. The airport overlay. So this is the section for the airport overlay. There's really two things happening with this one. Changing, sorry. Skip back one.
I don't see airport on here.
Sorry. I'm sorry. At the bottom of that, we've got the sort of the explanation of the what the P means, which simply means permitted. We didn't have that anywhere else on there. I think it was understood, but we wanted to make sure that that was clear, that the P meant permitted. Of course, the dash just simply means not permitted. That's in the airport overlay district. Yeah. Thank you. Special land uses. Special land uses with basic standards. So that's where we're adding campgrounds into the to that section. So you'll know that those are now a special use. And then those are the special use criteria that we came up with, or the standards that we came up with for campgrounds. All of these just providing some minimum for parcel size, 5 acres, some minimum setback distances for different things. If you were going to have retail uses, you know, a little camp store or something, that there would be some setbacks for that, some fencing, some landscaping requirements, hooking into sewer water, those sorts of things. So those would all be part of the special use standards for campgrounds. Moving away from campground for a minute, this is in the industrial zoning district. We just had a conflict for the non-industrial outlot development. You can see the minimum size for a parcel is 10,000 square feet. The graphic says then a maximum of 1 acre, although the text also said minimum again, so just kind of cleaning that up. As a result of the West Rock rezoning that we did, I guess I wanted to make sure it was clear for everybody that there's actually several other maps that we have in our ordinance that have specific sections that I really felt like, and maybe this is a little bit of overkill, but we probably should have noticed when we did the rezoning that all of these sections are going to be changing. So all of the map changes that you see here are really just a result of that one rezoning, but they are separate sections in our ordinance. So all of those maps would change as a result of the rezoning that we already did.
So I guess my question for you, Steve, is just from a functional standpoint moving forward, that every time we do a rezoning, does it have to come back before us again to redo all of the maps in the UDO, or is there a way that we can do that so that, hey, once the rezoning has been approved at the council level, staff is just empowered to update the maps?
Yeah, I think it was a good lesson for me that when we do that rezoning, that I think we'll just notice all of those sections of our ordinance that would get updated. So it would just happen once.
Okay. We just didn't do it this time. We didn't think about updating the ordinance in every one of the sections.
I didn't think about that each of those maps was an actual section in our ordinance that we referenced. So
Yep.
I think it's just a good lesson for me that we would do that as part of the rezoning.
I get it. Yep.
Building envelope overview table. This is in the form-based code district. 2 things on this map. Again, we have a conflict in that River, Michigan district. 10 feet in the side yard, but in the text version it is 15 feet. So clean that up. There's supposed to be 15. It's supposed to be 15 in both sections. And then you can see in the waterfront, we have in the column for maximum height, we also listed what the minimum height was, so we don't need the minimum. We can just have the 4 and 6 stories. And then just paying close attention, it's not a change on this one, but the north downtown, you can see that we have 6, 9, or 12 stories as maximum height. Why is that not changing? This is just really fun tonight. It's frozen. So north downtown, you can see in that maximum height part of the table there, we only had 6 stories for allowance there. Again, that chart that you saw before, 6, 9, and 12. So we just wanted to clarify that so everybody would understand that you can do all 3 of those depending on where you're at. Some clarification for drive-throughs. We thought it would be helpful. You can see up there in the red in the form-based district, we wanted to specify the exact sub-districts rather than just imply that it was all of the form-based code. It's just for those specific districts that that those regulations about drive-throughs apply. We think that's just a clarification. Again, kind of a conflict here in the ordinance, and we have lighting in our ordinance in a couple different areas. In this section, we mentioned 10-foot candles being the max. In our lighting chapter, it's actually 15. So we're changing that to 15-foot candles. Correction. Vehicle repair in the residential area. So this is another one that we would describe as a substantive change. We wanted to provide some, really some clarification or some parameters on what is permitted in terms of if you want to, you know, work on cars at your house. It's certainly not an attempt to prohibit that, but we wanted to have some parameters for that so people would know, you know, what's permitted, so neighbors would understand and know what expectations they would have if a neighbor was doing something. So it was just an attempt to clarify what the rules are for vehicle repair in residential areas. And then to go
Steve-
along with that, are
Steve,
the
do we have differentiation between small engine and large engine, or no?
no.
Okay.
No, and then to go along with that, these are the standards that we came up with that sort of build those parameters for what can be done. And essentially, it might be what you would expect to see, you know, that it has to be your car. You've got to, you know, work on one at a time. You can't have stuff outside, and maybe to your point, Brooke, about you know, small engine, big engine. There is some reference to, you know, no heavy equipment. So, you know, people aren't pulling cars apart in their garage. So again, just some of the tools that the code enforcement people thought would be helpful to put some parameters on what's allowed.
So then this is all non-commercial. This is,
Yes.
say, for instance, I buy a 1966 Mustang convertible on eBay and decide to redo it in my garage one winter. Not that that would ever actually happen. I'm allowed to do that in my own garage, but I can't say I'm going to do it for other folks and charge them for it.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, exactly.
Okay.
But we didn't have those regulations in there before, so definitely not a correction or clarification. That is definitely new. Off-street parking, again, we already have this, but we thought it would be helpful to put this at the top of this particular section. And then you see the reference to the other part of the ordinance where it already is, and then just some re-lettering as a result of introducing that. Same thing, just some renumbering, re-lettering. Accessory structures requiring setbacks. Again, sort of the same theme about explaining when permits are required, and then just some re-lettering that goes along with that. In the fence section, just adding a reference to another part of the section, another part of the ordinance where that applies. We've been doing that quite a bit. Definitions. So in our definition section, we either didn't have the same definition that we already have in our ordinance. So this page is from our subdivision chapter where we define in that chapter the condominium, a subdivision plat, or a site condo. But then in our definition section, as I say, we either didn't have the definition or we had a different definition. So talking to City Attorney Ron Vanderveen, we agreed to just use the same definition that we had in our subdivision section. Almost done. This is the review process, and you can see we have those columns that kind of give you the different procedures, whether it's the zoning administrator review, admin review, planning commission, et cetera. But then up in the top, in the text part of that, we thought it would be helpful to clarify that a little bit, changing the language to zoning administrator review process and permit. And then we carry that through as well. This is in regards to, you can see the two columns, zoning administrator and administrative review. So depending on maybe the size of a project and that new mixed use, for example, 1,000 square feet is sort of the threshold for whether it's zoning administrator or admin review. We wanted to make sure it was clear that we only send notices out. We still send notices out for admin reviews, but we only do it for admin review. We do not do that for a project, the smaller projects that just require a permit by the zoning administrator. So we thought it would be, add some clarity to that so everybody understood that that's only for admin review projects that are gonna get noticed. And then you just see that same, anywhere where we had the same sort of example where it's zoning administrator and then only admin review, that would be carried through as well. So I think there's about 3 or 4 areas where that same thing gets carried through. Again, in regards to that zoning administrator review and permit process, this is just the section of the ordinance that talks about that. And this section right now had, again, some blending with the Board of Appeals. And so we were taking, because we already cover that in a different section of our ordinance, we were taking all of that language out. And so it would only reference the zoning administrator review and permit process. So I know that's a lot of red, but it's really just a clarification. I did put in your packet the clean version, just it looks a little bit nicer to be able to understand that. So again, we're just talking about the zoning administrator review, nothing else. And then finally, what I would describe as the third substantive change is in regards to civil infractions. So right now, most of the UDO ordinance is a criminal misdemeanor, and then there are a few items that are civil infraction. We really essentially just want to flip that and have most of the ordinance as a civil infraction, and then just have a couple items which really relate to ADUs and some of the uses, and keep those as criminal misdemeanors. The intent here certainly is not about writing tickets. It's about getting compliance, and then just sort of having a little bit of an easier process. If we did have to write tickets, the civil infraction is a little bit maybe easier process or less intrusive way, so it's not a criminal record if you've got some sort of zoning violation. So again, the code enforcement folks thought this would be a better tool for enforcing UDO than having most of the things be criminal misdemeanors.
Seems a whole lot more benevolent as well. That we're not trying to charge somebody with a misdemeanor for
Right.
not doing their landscaping according to the UDO.
Right. It's a little bit easier. Again, it's not about writing tickets, but if we do have to do something, it's a little bit easier to get in front of an administrative judge rather than, start going to trial for these sorts of things. So, again, just think it's a little bit better tool and a little bit friendlier. Those are the changes. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We're asking for a recommendation to City Council for these changes.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yes,
Because
go ahead.
Steve went quickly. Steve, in regard to the corner lots in TNR, what precipitated that change? Was it that we overlooked that? Was the text wrong in the document versus what we decided along the way, or have there been issues?
Yeah, I don't really think there's been issues. I think what happened was that language came about from a variance that was done years ago. And so we drafted this special language, and it sounds like from just over time, we realized that we really didn't need that special language, and that if there were any other similar circumstances, because it hasn't come up again, that probably going through a variance process would be more appropriate than treating that district different than all of the others for one particular specific situation that happened.
Okay, thank you. And then in regard to campgrounds, I'm embarrassed, I don't know. Are there any campgrounds in the city right now?
I do not think so.
No,
We had an application for one, but
Okay, but there's not anybody running a campground in the city as we would like traditionally be thinking of a campground. Okay,
At one time, I think we had an application for one on the south end, but it never came to
Okay,
be.
okay.
Yeah, nobody's gonna become legal non-conforming.
That was gonna be my
Right.
that was my follow-up question, is if there was, are we gonna be putting somebody into non-conforming status by putting these there? But if we don't have any that are active right now, I really like the idea of putting standards in place, that if somebody comes before us, they know what it is that they need to do. One, to be able to put that campground in place, and two, we're providing a good environment, A, for the people who would be camping there, and B, for anybody who's a neighbor to that area, so, yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm ready to make some, we need public
Well,
hearings, right?
each one of these requires a public hearing. So I can,
Let's do it.
Since the crowd is so massive,
I know,
we should open a
I
public
can combine
hearing.
them.
Yes.
That's legally appropriate.
It would be appropriate, you gotta have a separate motion, I think, for each
A separate motion for each one. Okay. I will open a public hearing for each of these items concerning campgrounds, vehicle repair, civil infraction, and the housekeeping of the proposed text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance. Is that appropriate? Okay. Public hearing is open. Mark, would you like to come forward?
No, thank you.
Okay. I will close the public hearing for these items.
I move that we approve the proposed text addition to Chapter 39, Section 4.04 of the Unified Development Ordinance regarding campground standards.
Support.
All those in favor, since there's a lot of them, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay.
I move we approve the proposed text addition, Section 39-9.14 to Chapter 39, Article 9 of the Unified Development Ordinance, discussing the standards for vehicle repair at residential properties.
Support.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None.
I move we approve the proposed text amendments to Chapter 39, Section 39-12.13 to the Unified Development Ordinance regarding when a violation is deemed a civil infraction or a misdemeanor.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
And I move we approve proposed text amendments, housekeeping in character, to correct various grammatical, spelling, reference, and other similar items to Chapter 39 of the Unified Development Ordinance.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right. Thank you very much. Communications and petitions, scheduling of public hearings, there are none. Communications from commission members? All right. Communications from staff?
I'll just real quickly tell you that, I don't want to jinx it, but I think we are in the last steps of getting certified by the redevelopment ready folks from the state of Michigan. So I think that might actually be tomorrow.
Did they,
I think we got an email from Mark.
did they
Okay.
not sign when they were here?
Got us over the goal line.
All right, so we made it.
Almost there.
Yes, congratulations. I heard you guys did a wonderful job with the tours that day when they were in town. They had, what, 14 people they brought into town?
It
Yeah.
was delegation.
14 people from the redevelopment ready.
Yeah, from the state of Michigan. Yeah, they brought a whole bunch of folks. We ate at Jeff's place.
Fantastic.
It was wonderful to have him there.
All right. Motion for adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Anybody support? Wait,
Support.
what?
Support.
You have to come into the microphone if you're going to talk during the meeting. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, we do have one public.
Communications from the, we have a public hearing that we need to schedule?
The rezoning.
Yeah, the rezoning, yeah. we want-
That's
Oh,
right.
okay.
Thank you. Yeah, we did get the rezoning for, I guess what I'm calling 5320 147th Street. That's actually a piece of property that is coming into the city from the annexation process that we just went through. That's a large, 35-acre piece on the south side of 40th Street, 147th.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have that public hearing, and I don't know if Dwelling Place got us all of their stuff, so we were expecting to get their stuff as well, so we may have a couple.
So we need to schedule that to a date specific?
Do we? Is it July 12th?
So we need to specifically schedule that item to July 12th.
Well, we certainly have the rezoning on 147th. I guess I don't know what happened with.
I mean, they're applied for the regular meeting, so I don't think we have to schedule it date
Okay.
specific. Because they applied to come to the next meeting, so
Okay,
I don't think we've done that before.
okay.
So I don't
Is
know.
147th rezoned to industrial? Is that,
Correct.
Okay.
So it'll come into the city as residential, and then it has to be rezoned to industrial.
And that will be a public hearing,
Yes,
okay. To July 12th.
July 12th.
But that will be noticed as well?
Yes.
We're good. Okay. No more from you, okay. Motion for adjournment has already been stated. And support from Jen, and we are, everybody say bye.
Bye. Bye.